Is there a place for perfectionism in game development? I'm afraid the answer is no. Because game development, especially video game development, requires people to accomplish as much as they can in a certain amount of time. And the perfectionist tends to take inordinate amounts of times to try to make something absolutely perfect. I'll give you an example. I had a student in a game development class, a young lady who liked to draw, as many of the female students did. And I let her draw things in class because I knew her pretty well and I knew she was a good student. So I could watch her draw while class was going on. And she drew, and then she'd erase and redraw, and then she'd erase some and redraw. And this kept going on and on. And to my eye, and I'm not an art fan, it looked just as good when she started to erase as it did an hour later when she was still modifying it. She was a perfectionist. Unfortunately, if it takes you an hour to make a line drawing, then you're not going to be able to have a job in the video game industry because they can't afford that work rate. For game design, it's the same thing. Perfectionists want to make things perfect, and there is no such thing as a perfect game. Games are never truly finished. What happens is that you run out of time. You may run out of time because the deadline comes up for a video game that you've been working on possibly 2 or 3 years already, or the law of diminishing marginal returns sets in. And that is that the amount of time it takes you to make an improvement is simply not worth the value of that improvement. Now, if you ever get the opportunity to redo a game, which happens more often on tabletop games than in video games, then you can take advantage of the vast amount of playtesting, or what is effectively playtesting, that has happened since the first edition of the game was published, in order to modify it for the second edition and improve it. And if you ever get a chance to do a third edition, then the same thing happens. Always you're going to find ways that seem to improve the game. And that's partly because tastes change in the players, and partly because no matter how much a game is play tested, there are going to be things that nobody thought of yet that finally somebody does. And the result is that you're going to want to change something. So to summarize this, there is no room for perfectionism in the video game industry, although if you're a freelance tabletop designer and you want to spend 12 years perfecting a game, that's your business because you haven't submitted it to a publisher yet. But once it's in the publisher's queue, you've got to meet the schedules. Publishers cannot wait.